Okay. Today I'd like to share with you some things around using the cow-calf share lease calculator spreadsheet that's been developed by University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension. And this tool is a good way for people who own cows and also for people who are considering taking in cows or leasing cows in terms of evaluating what a fair cow lease agreement is. Before we get into using the spreadsheet tool and looking at an example, I thought it might be good for us to review why we might consider leasing cows. Cow-calf production generally requires a large amount of capital when you think about the operation. We're looking at a land base, cattle, equipment, and those require large inputs in capital, especially as we look at how values for those have increased in recent times. So for especially a beginning producer or someone who's getting started, to acquire the capital needed to put all those things together can be quite a challenge. And I think this provides an opportunity for people who maybe own cattle, who are looking to reduce their labor requirements, or maybe just looking at cattle as an investment to participate in the cost of production in a cow-calf enterprise. The main advantage to the producer is they can gain access to cows without having to purchase them. And from a capital outlay standpoint, this can be an attractive option. For the person who's the cow owner, it allows them to either maintain a cow herd, or potentially if they're looking towards retirement and they'd like to phase out of the ownership of their cows over time without providing labor, this may provide them a good option as well. There are really two options when we think about an arrangement between an owner of a cow and someone caring for those cows and taking the majority of the labor involved with them. There's what's called a cash lease arrangement and also a cow-calf share arrangement. And we'll look at a little bit of how those two differ in terms of how they can be used. Let's look at how a cash lease versus a cow-calf share arrangement might occur. In a cash lease arrangement, the cow owner gets paid a set amount per pregnant female each year. And the advantage to the cow owner in this case is they have known income. It's really less risk to them. And it's a simple to understand arrangement, and they guarantee they get a payment. Sometimes that payment can occur half up front and the balance at the end. It might be all up front or some other arrangement depending upon what the owner wants to do and how it works with the person who's caring for the cows. The disadvantage to the person in a cash lease who owns the cows is they don't get to participate in the possible production benefits if they have an excellent calf crop and high prices. So they actually may net less income from strictly a cash lease arrangement than they would from a cow-calf share arrangement. For the person who's leasing the cows, caring for those cows, the advantage to them is that it's a really simple, straightforward method. They know what they owe for the cows for the year. They can plan for those payments and then operate accordingly. The disadvantage is as for the operator who's caring for those cows, is obviously they have to come up with the cash to pay for the lease. And especially if the owner of those cows wants that cash lease up front, then they're going to have to maybe go out and borrow the money to do that. And then that's an added expense from an interest standpoint that they would have when they lease the cows versus a cow-calf share arrangement. In a cow share arrangement, the cow owner gets an agreed upon portion of the calf crop based on their contribution to the cost involved in producing a calf. The advantage in this case to the cow owner is that they can either sell those calves at weaning, or if they're wanting to maintain their herd, maybe put some replacement heifers back into the cow share arrangement, they can go ahead and retain those. And so they have more options with what they do with the calves if that's in a cow-calf share arrangement versus if they're just strictly getting a cash lease. The disadvantage to the cow owner, obviously, is they share in the production risk. If so, for some reason, there would be a lot of death loss to the calves. If prices would go down, they may actually net less dollars in a cow-calf share arrangement versus what they would in strictly a cash lease. In terms of advantages and disadvantages to the person who's caring for the cows, the operator, the obvious advantage for the operator is they don't need to come up with cash to pay for the lease of the cows. Both the owner and the operator are sharing in both production risk and price risk, and therefore they're sharing that risk with the owner of the cows, and that can be an advantage. The disadvantage then obviously also is the operator has to give up a portion of the calf crop. And it may be a situation where the operator likes the genetics of those cow herd. They're wanting to maybe build their own cow herd and phase out the the owner of those cows over time, and they'd like to maybe retain replacement heifers from this herd. And so it might be their preference to actually lease those cows rather than give up a portion of the calf crop every year. I'm going to walk through the Cow-Q-Lator cow-calf share lease decision aid. This is an Excel spreadsheet that's been developed by Roger Wilson and Matt Stockton, and it's available at the West Central Research and Extension Center's website. It's in the Ag Manager toolbox. And what this spreadsheet does is that it provides both the owner of the cows and the operator to walk through that spreadsheet and put their inputs in to see what each is contributing to the production of that calf crop. If you go to that website, the Ag Manager toolbox, and you click on that, you'll see this website pop up that says Livestock Production Decision Aids. And if you go to that list of websites there and you click on a cow-calf share lease calculator where this red arrow is, it will then take you to this next website that looks like this. Actually, the website will allow you to download the Excel spreadsheet to your computer. Once it's on your computer, you can go ahead and open it. And when you do that, then this Excel spreadsheet comes up and you can begin to input your cost of production numbers. So if you're the owner, you want to go in and put in what you're contributing to this lease. If you're the operator, you want to go in and put in your portion. You can see up here at the top where this green arrow is that I've given an example of a cow lease that we'll walk through today. And based on who is contributing what portion of cost to the production of calves, this spreadsheet then calculates what a fair share arrangement would be based on what each party contributes. It also calculates what would be a fair cash value, meaning if we were to rent these cows, just write a check for them to have control of them for a year. It shows us what would be an estimated fair return to the cow owner. If the owner is providing both cows and bulls for this lease, it shows that as well. So we'll just go on to the next slide in this and show how this spreadsheet works. The first section of the spreadsheet looks at general replacement and breeding input costs. There's some numbers here that really need to be carefully thought about as you begin to put the numbers in. You can see over here on the right side of the spreadsheet, we're looking at a share arrangement where it allows the cow owner and the operator to show what portion they're contributing. So for example, we may have a situation where we have maybe 100 cows. In this example, I said the cow owner owes them all, but it might be a case where maybe the cow owner has a certain number of cows and the operator has some as well. And so we would show what each is contributing in terms of their portion of ownership. Let's just walk through some of these lines to show what we would maybe want to think about as we put input into the spreadsheet. First, I think, is what interest rate do you expect to use? As I work with producers, obviously interest rates right now are at historic lows. If you were to go put money in the bank right now in a CD or in a money market account, the interest rate is extremely low. On the other hand, if you were going to go to the bank and borrow money for an operating loan or to purchase cattle, you would have an interest rate probably somewhere around that 4, 5, or 6%, depending on the terms and your operating or other investments that you were seeking to borrow money for. So I think it's important that both the cow owner and operator determine what they think a fair interest rate is. So the cow owner, they're thinking about what kind of interest rate they think is fair in terms of return on their investment. I think they need to think through that in terms of what's realistic. For the operator, they need to also be thinking about if they had to go borrow money to, and maybe actually borrowing money to operate these cows, what they need to get paid for in terms of what it's going to cost so they can cover their expense. Number of cows covered by the lease, that's pretty straightforward. That's the number of cows that are going to be leased out from the cow owner to the operator. What's it going to take to maintain this for herd in terms of how will females be replaced each year? This really is an important number as we think about the cost to the cow owner. If the cow owner wants to maintain the herd, wants to maintain their level of investment, it's important to put a realistic value in here. A typical number, if we're looking at running age cows where 2-year-olds are entering the herd and then cows leave as they become open and maybe leave the herd finally at an old age of 10 or 11, around the 16% replacement rate is realistic. If you're looking at a higher turnover ratio, maybe you're looking at 20 or 25%, that really changes the whole cost structure to the cow owner of this in this situation, because they're going to be spending more money to develop replacements and bring them into the herd. And so I think you need to look at this number carefully and come up with a realistic value, because it can really change how the numbers work in terms of what's a fair share lease or what's a fair cash lease arrangement. Average value of cows in the herd. This is another number that's important to come up with. Here we're looking at what's the real value if we were to take the whole herd and market them today. And we're looking at not only the young cows, but we're looking at cows all the way through. And coming up with what is a fair dollar value is really important. And that, again, will influence the value towards the cow owner based on what value they put in here. These cull values, what's the cow weight when you sell her, what's expected price, these are important in determining the revenue generated from that cow when she leaves the herd, as well as calculating what is the depreciation from that cow's value today in terms of what are you going to lose in terms of value when you sell her as a cull cow. These marketing costs, again, these are just a cost to the cow owner so that they know to include that as one of their expenses. What is estimated death loss? Death loss is a real critical piece to evaluate. Again, we want to look at what is a realistic number. Somewhere around 2% is probably realistic for a cow herd, but this is a discussion that needs to be had between the cow owner and operator in terms of what is an expected reasonable amount of death loss for the cows, and then if something should happen that would be drastically different than that 2% number, how will that death loss be handled? How many bulls are needed for the lease? This is, again, if the cow owner is also providing the bulls, that's a contribution they're making to the calf crop. In this example, I showed that the operator is doing that. How many bulls are going to be culled each year in terms of bull turnover, the purchase cost of the bulls, how long they're going to be used, and then the average value of that bull when he's marketed. So these are all general replacement and breeding inputs that both parties can put into the spreadsheet to show what they're contributing. Now let's go look at the next big cost, and this is the biggest cost as we look at most cow-calf enterprises, which is feed. And this year it's extremely a large value as we look at the cost of purchased feed, especially the cost of hay, the cost of pasture have all gone up significantly in the last several years. And so it's really quite almost breathtaking sometimes if you look at costs today in terms of feed costs to the cow-calf enterprise. For this example, we had the operator is providing all of the feed for this situation. So they put in what they're going to be contributing, whether maybe they're leasing pasture themselves or they own the pasture, what would be a fair market value. We showed a growing season grazing of 6 months at $35 per month. And then we just walk on through and include all of the expenses. In this case, there's some dormant season grazing on native range at 3 months at $24 a month. Also some corn stalk residue, 60 days at 80 cents per head per day. This operation is expecting to feed hay, and so we included that for about 1 month of hay feeding at $175 a ton. They're also going to feed some protein supplement as well as salt mineral. When we add all those things up and also include some estimated bull feed costs, this is again on a per cow basis, the total feed cost for this cow-calf enterprise comes up to almost $500, $492.90. You can see over here on the right, again, we break out what the cow owner contributes and what the operator contributes. And so it's really easy to conceive as a possible situation where maybe the cow owner has some crop residue, or maybe they have some pasture that they're going to contribute to this share arrangement. You could conceive of a situation where the cow owner wants to slow down, and they're going to maybe both provide the pasture and the cows, and the operator is going to provide more of the labor. And so you can see we can plug in different values based on which each party contributes to come up with a fair level of contribution in terms of what each party gives to this arrangement. After feed costs, we're looking at other cash costs, and these are things like veterinary and medicine expense, cash costs on buildings and equipment. These are things that I showed in this example lease that the operator is providing. Cash costs are things like if you have a pickup, you're going to need to pay for fuel, repairs, maintenance, insurance. four-wheeler. If you're calving these cows and you're using some buildings to do that, some corrals, there's some expenses to maintenance and repairs and upkeep, and so that needs to be included from the operator side. There's also a place to put in some miscellaneous cash costs. You can change these headings here to fit your particular situation. You can see I put in the cow owner had some miscellaneous costs. Maybe they're going to take out some insurance on some of these cows as a way to ensure, protect their value there. And the operator would have some costs as well that wouldn't be included in the things above. There's also a place to include AI costs. Maybe instead of using a bull, there's going to be some estrus synchronization and some AIing of cows as a way to get these cows pregnant. So that can be included also. Interest on purchase speed and cash costs. Again, this is something that pertains primarily to the operator in this case, as they're going to be probably borrowing money potentially if they're leasing the ground that they're using for their pasture lease, leasing corn stock, purchasing feed. They maybe need to borrow the money, and so there's an interest cost involved with that. You can see the values here of total other cash costs. And then this one is total labor costs. And this is one I think that needs to be looked at carefully. Oftentimes when people own cows, they don't pay themselves until they've paid all the other bills, and that's understandable. We think about they pay the feed costs, they pay their cash costs, and then what's left from that cow-calf enterprise is returned to labor management and capital investment. Well, if you think about someone who's leasing cows, they're caring for the cows, they're providing the labor for that enterprise, and that's part of their contribution to the cow-calf production. So I think it's important to come up with a realistic and fair value here, and one that both parties can agree upon, but not to overlook that because it is a significant contribution, especially from the cow-calf operator standpoint. After we get to that, we're going to be looking at the cow-calf and bull ownership costs. These are costs that are incurred based on ownership of an asset. So first, let's look up here at cow depreciation. Cow depreciation is at the top there. If we're looking at cow depreciation, these are looking at the value that that cow is going to lose from her current value today to when she's culled out of the herd. Cow death loss, that obviously is another expense. If a cow dies, she is no longer an asset that we could market, and so that's a loss. Interest on the cows, we're looking at the cow value times what's the expected safe return on investment. In this case, this value of $1,237 is based on that average cow value minus some depreciation times 5% interest, and that gives us that $61.86. All those values there are ones that, in this situation, the cow owner is contributing. Bull depreciation, bull death loss, interest on the bulls, those are things that are being contributed to by the cow operator, the person who's caring for those cows, and those are that person's costs. And you can see those are 100% of theirs on the right side of the sheet. When we get down towards the bottom, total ownership costs for both bulls and cows is right at $182. In this case, in ownership costs, the cow owners contributed 82%. The cow operator, who also owns the bulls, is contributed 18%. We also have a place for some management down here under ownership costs that they can contribute. And then finally, it gives us a total cost number where it goes through and totals what the cow ownership costs, what cash costs are, labor costs, feed costs, what each party has contributed. And then you can see this total cost number. We get to a 19% in terms of what the cow owner has contributed and 81% in terms of what the operators contributed. So when we look at what each party has given towards this business, that's their contribution towards the cow-calf enterprise. So finally, as we wrap up and we look at what are some key things to consider when you're looking at a cow lease or cow-calf share arrangement, first I think is the integrity of both parties. This really is a critical piece. Both parties need to be able to trust the others involved. And I think it's important that both get references if you're not familiar with who this person is. Visit with them, go look at their place, go look at what they have for facilities, maybe try to see some cows that they are caring for right now or visit with someone else who's maybe worked with them, so that you can get an idea of their integrity in terms of what they may be like to work with as a business partner. I think it's also important for both the cow operator and the cow owner to realize that for a cow lease or cow-calf share arrangement to work, it needs to be a win-win for both parties long term. And when we're thinking about a cow-calf share or cow lease agreement, we're really looking at more than a 1-year type deal. We're probably wanting to commit towards maybe a 2 or 3 or 5-year type situation. It's really not in the interest of either parties to have that be a short-term type of arrangement. Also, I think it's important to realize that for both the cow owner and the cow operator, there needs to be full and clear disclosure with the lenders involved with this. So if you own the cows, and I think it's important that you go to the person who's going to be leasing those cows, and you sit down with them and with their ag lender and have a candid conversation about what's going to occur, who actually owns those cows, and how that will the money will be distributed from the revenue that's generated from that calf crop. Cow-calf care. Again, I think it should be important that both parties talk about what is expectations around how cows and calves will be cared for. This kind of ties into what we talked a little bit about calf death loss, cow death loss. What are expected values there that should be occur, and then what is going to happen if numbers fall outside of what is expected. How will calf sickness and death loss be handled? Maybe who is going to be the consulting veterinarian? If there's a problem, how is that going to be addressed, and how will that be communicated both with the cow owner and the person who's caring for those calves? I think also having a plan in place so if there's some real unexpected death loss, some kind of catastrophe, how will that death loss be handled? Who will be responsible, and how will it be handled and shared? Is something else to visit about and put on paper. What's an acceptable cow breed-up? This is a number that needs to be talked about as well. And so if you think about that cow replacement rate and the cost to the cow owner, obviously cows that fall out of the herd more quickly than an expected replacement rate are an expense. And so I think it's good to talk about what is an expected breed-up. Is it in the low 90s? Is it in the high 80s? From a cow operator standpoint, you need to know that the cow owner needs to have an acceptable breed-up for it to work for them. From the cow owner standpoint, you also need to realize that it's not probably realistic to expect the cow caretaker to get a breed-up that's 98, 99%. That's just a lot of expense to get that many cows bred, and so it's probably not a realistic value. So again, discussing that, looking at what the real values are, and talking through that is important. How will hauling and marketing expenses be shared? This is especially important to discuss in a cow-calf share arrangement. How will expenses be shared once those calves leave the ranch and are going to the sale barn or maybe being sold on the video, visiting about and talking through that. I think going through and looking at what are expected results as well as best and worst case scenarios. Looking at that from both an operator and owner standpoint can really, I think, be helpful at the onset, and looking at realistic values there so that in an event one of those things occur, it doesn't maybe come as a surprise, and it's known how that kind of situation will be handled. Also, I think it's important to talk about an exit plan. If for some reason something happens to one of the parties involved, if situations change where maybe the cow owner needs to sell the cows, or the cow operator loses a lease and can no longer take those cows in, how will that exit plan occur? I think it needs to, again, be put in writing, clearly showing how that will happen so that it's clear to both parties up front what will take place in that situation. And finally, and I've alluded to this several times already, it's very critical in my mind that this agreement be in writing. Both parties put down their expectations, how this situation will be handled, this relationship in terms of cow owner and the person caring for the cows, so that there is no question about what's being agreed to and no question about what expectations were. Finally, there's some resources from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension. There's a Beef Cattle Share Lease Agreement publication that's available at the INNR pubs. If you go to that website, you can find that publication there at this address. Also, if you're looking at trying to come up with what are some fair or realistic costs, there's some Nebraska livestock budgets that can give you some numbers as a place to start. And also on the beef.unl.edu website, there's a page that talks about cow leases and walks through some things that both cow owners and operators should consider before entering into a cow lease. Finally, if you have questions about a cow lease and you are looking at the option of that and you'd like some input or have some questions around it, please feel free to either email me or give me a call. I'd be happy to visit with you about that kind of situation.